Okay, so in this video, I'm going to go over some stuff related to the database. Um, so first off, the database is running on the same AWS EC2 instance as the website itself. This means that they are running on the same machine and are able to kind of communicate with each other without using or without having to access the cloud. Um, so how do you access it? There are a couple different ways. First off, the really direct method is to SSH into the server as you would if you were going to change files or pull changes from GitHub. So again, here we are SSH into the AWS EC2 instance. And then to access the database, you just need to type in mysql -u root and then p and then type in the password, which will be supplied to you in the webmaster's bible. And then in here, you can just do any normal mysql command and it should work. Yeah. And like, since this is kind of not really visually intuitive and it's like kind of rely on you already knowing how the website is formatted and how the database is formatted in order to make changes. Um, this is not my preferred method. So to quit, you just leave it. And then the other way to access the database is to go to this URL, apousc.org/phpMyAdmin. This will lead you to a little sign-in page, and there you'll have to input the same credentials as you did here for the MySQL terminal command. But phpMyAdmin is basically a little extension or add-on for PHP that kind of lets you access the database in a more visual manner. As you can see, like, this has an actual GUI that you can like point and click and look at stuff. I'll start off by talking about the left hand bar. So here under this little inside this little rectangle area, you'll see all the different databases that we have here. Sys, phpMyAdmin, performance schema, MySQL, and information schema. Those are kind of the default configurations. I wouldn't mess with them. I did at one point, and I fucked things up, and I had to um, reset this up. So I would only recommend making any changes to APO USC 5. Not sure why it's APO USC 5, but that's how it is. That's what it is. So, and then there is WP48, WP393 in main. These two are for older versions of the website that were running on WordPress. Not sure which webmasters use them, but I don't think they're in use right now. But I ported them over from the old database just in case we need them in the future. But mainly, if you were to make changes to the website today, you would make changes to APO USC 5 main database. And so inside here, you can see all the different tables, I think. Not sure about the exact directory structure of MySQL. But you see active guests, active users, announcements, band, chapter, class, events, events cap, etc. So these are just typical MySQL tables. You can go through them and um, look at stuff. Yeah. So something to note, if you look into users, yeah, okay, so for example, I was looking at users. We have Myrtle here. We all know Myrtle. Yeah, yay, Myrtle. And then we have their password here and the user ID, etc. But this password isn't actually their password. This is an encrypted hashed version of the password. So even if you were to show people this website, you wouldn't be able to figure out what other people's passwords were. But if you were to just double click it, you can just change it to like another hash that you know the actual password of and change it that way. And so just looking at this, it's so much easier to change details compared to having to do like console commands and shit and figure out the correct syntax for MySQL. So yeah, this is like a really quick way to just find information that you need. You can change the number of rows, the number of entries that you are retrieving for any query. So right now, when you click on the tables on the left hand side, you're just browsing each table and looking at the contents. You can change the sort and everything. And this is a so here in this little gray box, it tells you the MySQL command that it's running in order to show you all of this. But you can also look at the directory structure, look at what kind of like what type each variable is in case you were to make like a script later to do stuff automatically. And then you can also just run your custom scripts. So do your insert commands, type them up here, and then you can either run them or you can, I think there was an option to preview the results so you don't mess things up. There's also this rollback when finished checkbox that you can test the thing, see if it works correctly. If it doesn't, you can just roll it back. If it does, you can run it again and make changes here. So yeah, PHP admin is a really useful tool. It's a lot more intuitive than a non than like than a command line interface. So something to keep in mind is that any changes made here in PHP admin or made here through the command line interface will reflect in live changes to the database and may make parts of the website inaccessible or corrupt parts of the website, such as the list of events and whether or not people can log in and stuff. So it's pretty important to back up the database before you make any large changes in case shit hits the fan and something goes wrong. So there are two ways that I know of to back up the database. You can, I don't remember the command off the top of my head, but you can probably Google it. There's a way to download the database from MySQL. And then there's also a way to export the database from PHP So this is probably the quicker method, at least from my experience. So yeah, and then it's also important to periodically export the database and keep a copy on your local machine, because right now the database isn't automatically backed up anywhere. So if the Amazon EC2 instance somehow gets corrupted and you're not able to log in, it would be really hard to get all the information back without having a backup. What else? Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, PHP is a preferable method over the command line interface for editing. What is it? Where is it? For editing individual details like changing someone's password or changing their username or updating their statuses. But if you were to try to make large scale changes, such as changing all the pledges to actives, this will be a very slow process. You have to click into each person's status and then change it to like a 0, change each one to a 0, and then do that for like 30 people, which wouldn't be too that bad because it's just going down this row. But if you were to make other changes, such as adding their bigs and littles and etc., or changing their positions from like normal member to like someone on e-board, that would be like one of like 30 different number tags that you had to assign them to, which would be pretty annoying. Again, it is still preferable over using the command line interface, but usually as a programmer you want to automate things so that you have to do less work. So as part of my semester, I made some tools. So if you look here, I'm logged into the admin account, and under the admin tools panel, admin tools sidebar, you see that we have, wait, this is outdated. Hello? Yes. Okay, so you will see that there are a couple of different options, such as adding big and littles, adding XCOM, adding pledge XCOM, adding pledges, crossing pledges, etc., and then some other options that were from previous webmasters. So these are just scripts that I made that makes it easier to make multiple changes without having to do them one by one manually. So for example, if you look at adding XCOM, it's telling you to add a CSV file and uploading it, and once you do, it's going to reflect the changes. But the CSV file has to be a certain format. I've included templates here if you look in the Google Drive for the webmaster account. There are templates for adding new XCOM, adding new pledges, and big little pairings. For right now, let's look at the adding new XCOM. So I've included some instructions on how to use this to add new XCOM members. There is this template sheets page. So basically, every position corresponds to a numeric value, a numeric constant. You would just add the first name and then the last name, the current year, and then the current semester, which should be a 0 or 1. Not what year these people are. But so for let's say fall 2020, this would be 2020, and this would be semester 1, I think, maybe 0, I'm not sure. And then just type in the first name and last name. Make sure that the values in these two columns match the database exactly, or else they will not find the right users and give them the permissions that they need. And so you would just fill this out and then download as CSV comma separated values, and then upload it to this page, and then click upload. So I'm gonna go in a little more detail about how this page works and how you can make similar scripts in order to make your work easier. So in the past, if you were to do the same thing as a script, you would have to go to users, find the name for each individual user. Let's say I'll look at Justin Chang. Where you at? Justin Chang Chan 043. You would need to go over to their position, and then change it to the appropriate values, and then find the next user and change it to the appropriate value. And that'll take a long time. But here, you just need to insert everyone's names and then their year and the semester in this column on the first row. I talked about it in the how to use page. Download this and then upload it, and then it does all the work for you. This should save a lot of time, but making it took a while because I wasn't used to MySQL, etc. And then for the code itself, I'm going to walk you through the page on how this actually works. Okay, so this is the PHP file for the add XCOM page here. It includes session and the database. And then first off, it checks to make sure that the user is an admin. If you're only allowed access to this page if you're logged into the administrator account. Okay, so this is the relevant part of the file under upload on line 35. So once you select the file and choose upload, Ajax is going to detect that you've uploaded a CSV file, and then it's going to check to make sure that the file is what is expected, and then it's basically going to extract all the variables that it needs, and detect which user should be which user, and then which user should be what position. And I run two prepare statements here. This first one is to attempt to find the user whose first name and last name corresponds to the CSV file entries, so here and here. And if it finds someone, it's going to set it as a result, and then it's going to retrieve the username, and then it's going to run another prepare statement that adds the user into the officers table, and then it's going to update the user's position depending on what they are, and then it's going to close the connection to the database, and then refresh the page and let the user know that it was successful. So if this was not successful, this page would not how should I say this? Okay, so in the case that this is not successful, say maybe a username was wrong, or first name last name was wrong, or a user was not found, this page would refresh, but it would show like a blank page with some kind of error. If it was successful, it's going to show like XCOM successfully added here in tiny red text or something. But if it did not run successfully, you would have to debug it, either by looking over your prepare statements again, or you can go into the logs, cd log, cd MySQL, and then go into these error files and then check to see where the error was. Okay, so next is how does this script connect to the database? So in order to connect to the database, the PHP script has to verify that all the details are correct and the user is authorized to log in. And to do that, it makes sure that the user knows the correct login details, such as what server they're trying to connect to, which user is trying to connect to it, and the password for that user, and the database name. So these three values are the same values as what we use to connect to the MySQL database here. So for example, root and then the password. And if it was correct and everything's successful, it's going to let you make changes. If it's not, then it's going to let you know that it failed to connect to the MySQL server, whether because of invalid validation details, or if the database was down or something. It will let you know what that error was. And so these are variables that are set within this secure constants file. You see it grayed out here because it is not backed up on GitHub, and that is for security reasons. Make sure to not let this secure constants file get leaked out, because if it does, other people will make changes to the website, and we don't want that. So here we see a constants file. So this is kind of similar to how the secure constants file is formatted, but it is not as vital to be hidden. So here I can, so yeah, so here, for example, we define current president as Chan043. That is Justin's username. So to get the reference to the variable Chan043, we just need to type in current president. If you type it here, you see it in purple, which is the same color as where'd it go? XCOM. As here, as you see, DB server is just another variable that is referencing something else, and that something else is located in the secure constants file. And so that's kind of how my script works, and how it interacts with the database using PHP. But the way the website was set up in the past, most of the website's interactions with the database is a little bit different. For example, I think I will walk you through how adding an event works. So if you look to the if you go to the add event page, you'll see that you can input all this information, and then you can submit it, and it would create the new event, and store it in the database. But the way that it actually makes that happen is actually kind of complicated. It goes through a lot of steps. So let's go to the eBoard add events page. So once you submit, let me find it, it's been a while. Yeah, so right here on line 90, you see that everything here is the form. Once you click submit, it's going to go to process.php and let them know that you're submitting a new event. So once you click submit, it's going to navigate to process.php, and then let them know that you are adding a new event. There's some kind of like URL tag, but I can't find it right now. So let's just go to the process.php. Process.php is like a kind of in-between page that a lot of the website goes through when it's trying to run code. For example, when it's trying to load a family tree, it's trying to verify someone's login information. When you try to add an event, retrieving event, viewing events, etc. So in process, it's going to check to see which post parameters are set in the URL. Sub login, sub rush login, delete event, event sign up, rush event sign up, flaking other, delete sign up, delete rush sign up, etc. There's a lot here. Like this is one of the longest files in the whole website. I haven't even gone through this whole thing, but I just checked what I needed to do. So let's say I think it's proc add event. Yeah, so um under add event, once you submit the form, it's going to add the parameter sub add event to the URL, and then once process of PHP finds that, it's going to run the method proc add event. Let me find it. Proc add event, which is going to check the session. Yeah, it's going to make sure that the event is valid using session. So session is like session ID. If you're taking CS201 or ITP web development class, you should know what that is. As you can see here, it's passing in the post parameters as parameters for the add event function for this add event call for the session, including everything that was in the form on the add events page. So after it goes to process, it goes to session and procs the add event method. So let's go to session now. I think session was on the main page. Session and include. Okay, so inside session, it's going to go to add an event. So as you can see here, all the parameters from earlier are passed in here, and then it's going to access a global database variable as well as a form. Actually, I don't know why the fuck the form is here because you have all the variables. Maybe it's for something else. Who knows? Anyways, it's going to check all the values, and then it's going to set the database call, and then okay, so once it goes through all the necessary checks, it's going to call database and have it add a new event with the verified, validated, and improved and whatever parameters. So now it's going to go over to database and go to the add events method. So let's go to database.php. It's also an include folder. So in database, it's going to go to add new events. And then here, it's actually going to make the MySQL query and then have the extension run it. So this is just like a normal MySQL MySQL query. It's not a prepared statement, so it's vulnerable to like attacks and shit, but I haven't fixed it. Probably will at some point. We'll see if that happens. So again, in review, when you go to the add event page, when try and add a new event, it's going to call process.php and let it know that you're trying to add a new event. Once you're at process.php, where to go? I'm blind. Once you're at process.php, it's going to proc add event. It's going to let session know that you're trying to add an event. So once you go to session, it does some like shit on its end, and then it's going to let database know that you're trying to add an event. And then once that happens, it's going to kind of go down the cursive stack and let them know that each step was completed successfully. And then the event will be added, and you'll see it on the page. So this is how a lot of the older database interactions on the website works. It's a little bit more convoluted than the way I did it with my at XCOM page, but this might be like lazy programming. Who knows? This might be more secure. But as you can see, there was a lot of code. I haven't gone through all of this. It was kind of confusing. So my advice would be, if it works, it works. If it doesn't work, try to figure out and make it work. It doesn't need to be super optimal. Hopefully this was enough to give you a decent understanding of the database and how it might interact with the rest of the website.